Do you know about it?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. I mean, to set the groundwork for where I'm coming from, obviously, I've got a few like facts here that I'd just like to say because obviously it's the basis for a lot of my work.
Yeah, sure.
And obviously, this number, this 1111, is it seems to work itself into a lot of things. I mean, predominantly the first thing is the universe itself, and obviously on the 11th of August 1999 at 11:11 a.m. there was a total solar eclipse that was observed through Europe. And if you move that further on the end date, December 21st, 2012, the end date of the main calendar, the winter solstice, which is when the calendar ends, is at 11:11 a.m.
So I've heard.
So obviously, so we've got this effect where the universe is ringing these numbers at us, in accordance to consciousness and stuff.
Yeah.
And when you look at it in an astrological sense, with the precession of the equinoxes and the 26,000 year cycle of the Earth wobbling through the 12 signs of the zodiac, we're said to be moving into the new age of Aquarius, and Aquarius is the 11th astrological sign. And so, getting further into it, you look at the numbers of 2112, 2012, and you add all those numbers up, and you get an 11. And then you look into the sun, for instance, and the sunspot cycle, so 11 years, and basically everything that you can just keep finding these 11s out of things. And you could argue that, are you looking for them? But basically, when it's that amount of things within the universe, it's not like I'm looking for them because they are there.
Yeah.
You can't deny that. And so then you start moving into the numerology of it. And for instance, if you get 1111 and you multiply it by 1111, you get the number 1 2 3 4 3 2 1. Which is a pyramid. Okay, so you've got a pyramid numerology that you can get out of the 1111.
Backtrack on that a little bit and take it a little bit slower for us again.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, if you got the time code 1111 and you multiply it by the same thing, so 1111 times 1111, you get the number 1 2 3 4 3 2 1.
Okay.
If you imagine that as a visual, you've got a pyramid.
So one step up, that's number one. Then we have two, that's 2 steps up. Is that what you're going at here?
Yeah. So essentially, because you've got the 1 2 3 4 3 2 1. If you would plot that on a graph,
right,
on X and Y, you'd have a pyramid.
Interesting.
And the same decreases. So if you've got 111, and you times it by 111, you get 1 2 3 2 1. You get a pyramid, whichever way you look at it. Anything with a base of 1.
Interesting.
And so then, if you look at the 11 itself. And in binary, an 11 stands for a 3. So obviously you've got a trinity out of it. Do you know what I mean? So if you were to convert to binary, it would mean it'd be 3. So essentially then if you look at this idea of the trinity with it, 33rd degree Masons and the 33 that goes around, obviously if you turn that into the trinity and you divide 33 by 3, you get 11.
That's interesting.
So you start seeing these 11s, as I'm saying. So then you move on to recent events, and you get to September the 11th, 2001, right? And you realise that the building was stood like an 11. The 2 towers stood like an 11.
Indeed.
And then you've got 9/11, which is 9 plus 1 plus 1, which is 11. And then you realise that September the 11th was 111 days until the end of the year. And then you start thinking about the first plane that hit the World Trade Center, and it was Flight 11.
There you go, yeah.
Right, and the total number of crew on Flight 11 was 11. And then you look into it further, and the New York State was the 11th state of the US Constitution. Right, and so then you start thinking about where September the 11th stands in as far as years are concerned. And September the 11th, 2001 stands 11 years from 2012. Right. And there's an author called Jose Arguelles. He wrote that from 1992 to 2012 would be in a period of May and no time, the time of no time, which was the transition of the ages kind of period in which basically world disasters and tension would be on the up and rise constantly. And this period of no time was 1992 to 2012. And so 9/11 in September the 11th, 2001 was 9 years from the start of no time, 11 years till the end of no time. Synchronistically, it was placed bang on where it should have been. So then you start thinking about, was 9/11 an event that was either, was it as Jose Arguelles would put it, was it an inevitable event? Sorry, inevitable event. Was it designed by the universe for it to happen as it did?
Yeah.
You look into it further, and World Trade Center commenced building in 1966 and finished building it in 1977. So it took 11 years to create as well.
Yeah.
So you can move on from that and forget all that for the time being, and then you can get to September the 11th in history. And on September the 11th, 1990, at 9:09 p.m., that's 11 years prior to 9/11, George Bush Sr. made his very first speech entitled "Towards a New World Order" in the UN, at the UN. So this was 11 years prior. And then if you take that back 60 years, so you go back to September the 11th, 1941, you'll realise that 60 years to 9/11, that was when the soil was broken for the Pentagon.
Pentagon, yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And so you've got this date, September the 11th, again running through this kind of, the nasty war machine of America, if you want to call it that.
Exactly.
And so then, basically, there's something that happened much further back in time than that. And there's a book written in 1981, and it was called The Birth of Christ Recalculated. And it was written by a guy called Ernest L. Martin. And he claims to have calculated the exact date of Jesus Christ's birthday based on celestial charts for that era.
Yeah.
Basically, he's worked out with the famous Star of Bethlehem, which was, he worked out that essentially Jesus Christ was born on September the 11th, 3 BC. And this book was released in 1981. So, we've got another date there.
And I think that is, sorry to interrupt there, but I think that's actually a key area to why we potentially are seeing so many things oriented around the 9 and the 11 September.
Definitely. Definitely. I mean, when it comes into other significant events, for instance, when you think about America and NASA and stuff, the very first shuttle that got to the moon was Apollo 11.
Yeah, there you go.
And then, for instance, in Great Britain, I'm sure I think it's celebrated around the world actually, but on the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month, we celebrate Remembrance Day, in which we honour our war dead, but it's on an 11/11, and it's basically the Queen and a load of other people taking poppies to a cenotaph, which is an obelisk essentially.
Yeah.
So, little strange events going on all over the place.
Indeed.
I mean, talking about the Queen moving into royalty, and this is where I'll lead much deeper into royalty later on. But basically, if you look into the history of the word crown and the royal crown, the word crown was derived from Anglo-French word called caroon, which is derived from Latin for corona. But the year that the word crown, was first established was in the year 1111.
Oh, really? That's interesting.
Right.
Oh,
so,
wow.
You can't just say that these are coincidences. All of these things that are kind of connected up, and I get to a point where at first I thought there were coincidences, but then you think, what is this thing called chance?
Yeah.
What is it?
Indeed.
So anyhow, that's the groundwork for 11. And then this is where I've started seeing this time code 1111 on clocks and stuff, and this is when I started getting this flood of information. I don't know where I've been receiving it from, but I've been receiving it from somewhere recently. I don't know what it's all about, to be honest. But basically, sorry.
No, I just wanted to say it's interesting, and to some extent, I think that this is in a way information that wants to get out. I think it's kind of a self-containing awareness within itself, meaning that it is trying to reach out and teach us how things are interconnected. And I think that numerology and so-called coincidence or meaningful coincidence, synchronicity, is a perfect way to demonstrate to us that everything is interconnected. And I think that there are so many levels to all of this. So what we're beginning to discover are some of the most, in a way, actually obvious and very clear signs of this. But I would imagine that this is something that actually runs throughout exactly everything, if you have basically the amount of time to study something or look at it in close enough detail.
Exactly, I mean, the thing with all the 11 for me is essentially, I come from the viewpoint, I believe in a mind before matter universe.
Yeah.
Everything stems from consciousness. Consciousness precipitates matter, not the other way around, as scientists would have you believe it.
Yeah.
And I mean, the way that I can kind of prove that to myself and hopefully to others, is that, I mean, I don't mean to be crude about this, but when, for instance, a man is sleeping and he has an orgasm in the middle of the night, right, the process that's created that is not any physical action, it's all stemmed from thought.
Yeah.
And so if you think about that, then obviously that thought has then created the ability to create life.
That's
if
right.
you understand where I'm coming from.
Oh yeah, definitely, exactly. It's a very good point.
That for me is the proof that everything is a mind before matter universe. You can create life with thought.
Yeah.
That means that everything that you're looking at essentially is consciousness. And that's my way of that's where I come from with a lot of this. And given the 11s, connected with the Pentagon and connected with the 9/11 World Trade Center disaster and everything, that to me is indicative of someone else trying to hijack consciousness. I don't know what it is, but for me there seems to be some kind of other side of things that are hijacking this number for themselves.
Hey everybody, Cohen here with Cohen's Phone Repairs. Today I have an update on 5G. Now everybody says don't get a 5G phone because they're dangerous because of the 5G. Now I have two 5G phones in front of me. Right there is where the 5G chip is supposed to be, and right there is where the 5G chip is supposed to be. I'm sorry to break this to everybody, but every phone, and again, I fix phones every day, so you can take this from a reliable source. There's not a single phone in Canada that supports 5G. There's not a single carrier in Canada that supports 5G. It's a marketing scam. There's no such thing as 5G in this phone. What you're investing in is 5G for the future. So they're charging $200 extra for 5G when it's not even there. I don't know if this speaks wonders to you, but I think the government's doing other things with the 5G towers. So if this doesn't say something to you, I don't know what will. But again, I fix phones every day, and every 5G phone I fix does not even have a 5G chip in it. And right there is where it's supposed to go.
It's a substance used as a drug and life elixir. The drug is the most expensive on the market and extremely popular amongst Hollywood stars. It is derived from blood of young donors, preferably below the age of 12 years old. The blood needs to contain the highest amount of adrenaline, for which the children are terrorized, raped and tortured to raise their adrenaline level. When the child is in an extreme state of pain and fear, the blood is harvested. This happens in the so-called adrenochrome harvesting sites on an industrial scale and within a worldwide network, as the documents that I will share in this video will point out. It started with this letter that was sent to a German blogger. Dear Mr. Schaefer, I'm sending you the photocopies and printouts because I am afraid. I ordered USB sticks at Amazon and received them last week. One stick had an opened packaging and there was data on it, PDF texts. At first I wanted to send the stick back, but then I thought, no, let's first see what's on it. I do not understand English very well, but what I understand is that it was a list of abducted children. Those are probably caught and abused. It is terribly sad. A company called CYM runs scams and evaluates children. They offer the adrenochrome and sell it. Disposal means elimination. There are hundreds of pages and I can only print out a few. There are also lists of names and photos of adults. I think that these are the people who keep the children captive. So she sent these files to this blog because he was writing about Q and Trump's plan. I cannot send an email because I'm really afraid, and I think that these are terrible killers that torture the small children, just like Q also writes. I've been reading about Q for a long time. Please find the possibility to publish this on your blog or on a website. I've checked the names, etc., etc. I have a few, I've looked up a few of them, not all of them. And these companies, they seem so serious. Can you give the list to Mr. Trump, who will hopefully get them out of their misery? I'm really afraid, and in case this letter gets intercepted, they cannot find my name because my son is about the same age as these poor children. It's signed by Steffi, and the PS is, if I have to send more, then I must be careful. Please write on your Hominibus website, like, Steffi, contact me. Then I see that I can answer. So this is the first document that was found on this USB stick. It is a document by the CYM Corporation, an inmate report. Here are the names of the children, the birthday. This child is 6 years old, the blood type, in custody for this number of months. So this child has been in custody for almost 2 years. There are also children that are in custody for 3 years. The adrenochrome quality, the sites, the camps, and I will get into that in the presentation a bit further on. The year when they are planned to be disposed, whether they are suicidal or not. So these children of 12 years old and younger, many of them are suicidal. The country of origin, the daily quota, which is dazzling to me, 25 daily quotas, and the inmate number. This is page 1 out of 12 pages, and it's pretty recent. It's printed in June 1st, 2020. This goes on and on and on. These names need to be searched in a database, police database, CPS database. This is the volume of documents. And let's go to the next page. This is a summary. No, wait. This is a summary. The CYM Corporation Production Report. Raw adrenochrome production. These are the locations of the camps, the origin of the countries where these children are abducted, the number of inmates. You can see it's large volumes, the production in milligrams, and the average age. This is the adrenochrome production report per child. These are the names, date of birth, age, inmate number, name of the camp in use for this number of months, captured in country of origin, and the year when they are planned to be disposed. Part 2 of the production data, the blood type, suicidal or not? If marked yes, isolate subject and increase production. These people have no empathy. The daily production and type of torture. This is really shocking. Children come from Costa Rica, incarceration facility. I think this is the abbreviation of Guantanamo Bay. Surprising, because the bad guys were supposed to be locked up there. Apparently not. And there's many more captured from the United States, Canada. And again, I will go a little bit further, faster through these documents, but there's many documents. And another thing that is interesting to point out, that these forms have been filled in with a typewriter, and you can tell because the print of each letter is slightly different, which is a characteristic of a typewriter, an old-fashioned one, to avoid a digital paper trail. I'll show you the volume here. So these are all the forms. There are many. It's huge. So this is the disposal report by the CYM Corporation. In the first quarter of 2019, this number of children were disposed. In 2019 total, almost 400 children were disposed. I guess this is the adrenochrome quota or quality. When children have a B minus quality, they will be disposed. This is a more detailed disposal report. Page 1 out of 8. Name of the child, date of birth. So this child is 8 years old. To be disposed. It was disposed in the first quarter of 2019. This child is 7 years old. And again, this goes on and on and on. These are the locations of the adrenochrome harvesting sites. United States Army Special Medical Corps Personnel Performance Report. Center name, that's the camp name, and rank. Some sort of diagram that I do not completely understand. It's related to the personnel and the performance. Camp Anza, Camp Callan. Please note these names, because these are significant. Camp Kearney, Camp Kohler, Camp Lawrence J. Hearn, Camp Lockett, Camp McQuaid, Camp Santa Anita, Camp Sealy, Camp Stoneman, Camp Young. Now if you look at these names, for instance Camp Callan, it was a United States training center operational during World War II. It was located in San Diego, California, and the facility was closed shortly after the war, and a few traces of the base remain. This is what it looked like at the time. But apparently, according to these documents, these camps are still operational. This is Camp Anita, the way it looked in the Second World War. This is another camp that is listed in these documents, Fort Point, and according to Google Maps, the location is just below the Golden Gate Bridge, and I think this is this building, I'm not sure. There are all these deserted places. Actually, this is a museum, so could also point out to the underground facilities. Camp Stoneman, Used to be a United States Army military facility in Pittsburgh, California. Also closed down. So that's a pattern. Another pattern is that their location is near national parks, very deserted areas. Fort Ord, California, near Monterey Bay, and I will get back to Monterey Bay in a minute. I don't know where the fort exactly is. This area there are many locations that are called Fort Ord, but there's also a national park here. So a secluded area. Fort de John, very desolated. And this is a list of closed military installations in Claffornia. And if you look at the list, it's identical with the names in these documents. Camp Anza, Camp Callan, Camp Kearney, Kohler, Lockett, Santa Anita, Stoneman, Fort Ord, Fort Point, Presidio of San Francisco. This list is identical with this list. So I suspect that all these closed military installations throughout the US are all still operational, either above ground or below ground. And again, this is extensive, page 5 out of 8. We'll go fast forward. This is a huge document. And whatever this is a professional organization and big scale. The CYM Caring Corporation. Caring is youth. Youth is money. Money is freedom. Well, freedom not for the children, for sure. Note of promotion. Lance Walls works at Camp Callan as a warden, senior warden or leading warden, assigned to CYM Corp, New York, warden in adrenochrome harvesting site, AHS, or another function. I would like to point out this contact information. In Monterey, California, I'll go back to the military camps. This is the same address as this. And you can find this at installationsmilitary1source.mil. And this is an official organization that helps mediate American military to provide housing. Also connected to these locations. What I find shocking is if you look at these documents and these pictures, I mean, this looks like a very young, nice girl. Why is she working at these camps? According to this document, needs to be investigated. Another thing I like to point out is this location of the address on the letterhead. The CYM Corporation headquarters, 725 Fifth Avenue, New York, office 292. That's the Trump Tower, 725 Fifth Avenue. But what's interesting is that Benjamin Fulford wrote in his report of September 28th that there were some arrests made in regards to this data dump, and that this shop, Abercrombie and Fitch Kids on Fifth Avenue, was a facade, a cover-up for this organization, and is actually right across from Trump Tower. So the Trump Tower address might also be a smokescreen. I mean, it threw me off at first because I thought that's kind of odd that the Trump Tower is listed on there. but there's hundreds of offices, and you can hide things in plain sight, and also use it as a smokescreen that eventually could point at Trump. So there's different explanations for this. Then this address is also interesting. Deliveries 200 Forbes St. Annapolis in I think it's Maryland, I'm not sure. And that's this address, and it's a medical building, and apparently it's a pediatrician office. So they need to do some explanation why their address is showing up on this letterhead. So there's all these personnel. This is another thing I'd like to point out. The CYM is a registered trademark. Register number 5475570. Now if you go to the registration of the trademarks, this number is the registration of the word mark CYM. Now if you register a trademark, you register either the word mark or the logo separately or combined, and preferably both, because that gives you more protection. Now what's interesting, so this is not the logo, but it's actually the way it's written down with which characters, the character mark. What's interesting is that it's allocated to the category restaurant services, and the registrant is Limited Liability Company, Pennsylvania, 4658 G Street, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Now this address lists 4 companies that have the same address: MRP LLC, HP Platano Inc., CYM Island Kitchen, La Tierra del Chicharron. Now these two is a restaurant in Philadelphia, and at first glance it's a normal, out of the ordinary restaurant that serves Caribbean food. Island Kitchen, Chicharron y Mas. And the CYM Island Kitchen is related to the CYM and the CYM Island Kitchen. Seems odd at first that they would list it as a restaurant. The CYM trademark registration is intended to cover the category of restaurant services, but based on these documents, they're involved in adrenochrome production. This is the CYM Chicharron restaurant. It's in a very rundown neighborhood in Philadelphia. As you can see, they have a large storage space with ventilation shafts on top. Now, you have to realize that adrenochrome, the fresh liquid form, needs to be cooled. So whenever packages are sent, they need to be attached to a cooling unit and a battery. Now, if you deliver something like that at a restaurant where there's a large storage space, nobody would think something about it. And also when people come to pick up packages, nobody would think anything about it. So I think this is a cover. But let's go back to the presentation. This is the personnel reports, notes of promotion. And again, these many pages, and these names need to be investigated. I haven't been able to find a trail because usually more people with the same name pop up, and you can't find these pictures. So I haven't been able to find a match. So a forensic detective needs to look at this. This is the CYM Corporation Personnel Report in detail. You see the names here, the ranks, date of birth, the camps where they work. You see Camp Santa Anita, Camp Callan, Fort Ord, Camp Stoneman. I think this is just California, these files. And again, it's just goes on and on and on. So there's a lot of people working there in this company. A lot of people. In the data dump, there was also a printout of an email to the legal department of George C. Scouts with a satellite image regarding the orderly disposal of human remains. Please note that burial site number 9 is now clearly visible on satellite imagery. Can anyone conceal it better? The fence alone won't be sufficient. So there's at least 9 burial sites. That's pretty shocking. This is a letterhead sent to other companies, whether these are distributors or clients, it's unclear. Pretty recent, July 5th. Please find enclosed our confidential new detainee and production reports as follows. Production of raw adrenochrome per detention center with average age of detainees. List of detainees used for production, duration of custody and scheduled disposal date. Note that the column suicide only states suicide attempt. A finished suicide would appear in the disposal report, not enclosed. The disposal report is what I showed you earlier. The price list of 2020. The quality per 100 milligram, almost 2000. When the quality is below B00, B minus minus, the children will be disposed. Please note, check or cash in advance. Checks made payable for CYM Corporation Special Interest Division. C.S. Yorrington, CEO and founder of CYM. I looked at this name and it doesn't pop up. It looks like this is a professional organization and they have some IT people and hackers working for them, making sure that the digital trail is, people are not trackable. And again, this is many letters sent to companies, also in the UK, Liverpool, Manchester, Liverpool, that's a lot of documents for a LARP to falsify and to create. I think this is the real deal, to be honest. Comptroller report, page 1 out of 35. Some sort of list with all different codes that I do not understand, abbreviations I do not understand. These are also filled in or created by an old-fashioned typewriter. Now, which company do you still know nowadays that works with an old-fashioned typewriter? This is very voluminous. This was part 1. In part 2 I will go into the international network, documents from Germany, the UK and links to China. Please download the files and store them in a safe place. Make sure they do not disappear. Share far and wide. You can download the files at this address, which will allow you to open the files in Telegram. If you do not have the Telegram app, you can download all the files here directly. Benjamin Fulford, in his September 28th report, also put a link, an archived link, but it only makes you download the first file. But help to expose these crimes. These crimes can only exist in the dark. Let's bring this to the light, and by exposing it, we will make it stop. Thanks for watching. This is part 2 of the data dump in regards to adrenochrome harvesting. If you haven't seen part 1, please go and check on this channel for part 1. I would like to go into some other documents that are related to Germany, the UK, with links to China. This is one of the documents that was on the USB stick that was deliberately leaked, I'm sure, that lists these hospitals in Germany. There's the clinic ID number in this column, the name of the hospitals, University Clinic, Krankenhaus is hospital. So there's the hospital in Tübingen, in Mannheim, Baden, Weingarten, Ulm. So all cities in Germany. Now there's a specific person listed. So this is a female, 8 years old, blood type, delivered in 2017, and the price. So it looks like there's victims also connected to these hospitals. Very, very concerning. There's other lists here. Confidential contact visitation by CYM Germany. I don't know what this abbreviation means. Page 1 from 40 pages. Also pretty recently printed out in 5th of September 2020. ID number in this column, the department, the zip code and town, organizations, I'm not sure what these abbreviations stand for, the username and the contact information, probably a phone number, I'm not sure, and angefangen seit means started since. These are this hospital, I guess, is started from 2009, but there's also ones that started in 1997. So this is just contact information by the key people, maybe. And there's many documents for this. You can see how many lists there are. This is another type of document by CYM Deutschland. This is an abbreviation that indicates that it's an officially listed, registered company. And I looked up the registration in the Unternehmenregister. That's the official listing of companies. There's a CYM popping up, and actually in various cities, CYM in Mainz, different listings, CYM Handel in Bremen, and then in another document there's a postal box in Berlin. This is a limited liability company, CYM UG, located in Bahnhofplatz number 1 in Mainz. This is actually the train station. I'm not sure if there are offices above the train station, but it could also be a fake address, just to have an address listed in these files in the registration. So this form is related to South Germany. This is the organization, the medical organization, the type of the blood type, whether it's a boy or a girl. They started out in 2007. These columns are kept empty. These particular children started in 2017. This is the money that is involved. It's unclear to me whether they are paying this or receiving this, but there's hundreds and thousands of euros involved per organization. It's hospitals, medical centers, clinics. And again, these are files and files and files. If you download the files yourself, and there's a link at the end of the video, you can search for this in detail. But it's pretty shocking. I mean, the volume of this, it just goes on and on and on. Just fast forward. Millions of euros involved. It's a big company, big business, I mean. This is the second letter of Steffi. Steffi is a pseudonym, I think. She writes, I don't think there's much more on the stick. I copied it and put it away safely. If something happens to me, then it goes to the Russian embassy in Berlin. That has already been taken care of, from what I understand from the blog of the German Patriots. It's been sent to the American and Russian embassy. More forms with codes, different codes in the sector of biopharmaceuticals, more codes, region, area in UK, code and code description. So there's all these codes that are used to administrate this business. And I think these documents are added on this USB stick to tell a story. So this is not an accidental leak. I think this is a deliberate leak done by somebody who wanted to expose this and decided to do it this way. Now this is an interesting thing. This is a shipping form by Kühne and Nagel. That's like the shipping company like DHL or FedEx, sent from a postal box in Munich. Sent by CYM Deutschland, postal box in Berlin. And this is very interesting. It is sent to the Department of Health and Social Care, which is the Ministry of Health in the United Kingdom. Why is the Ministry of Health ordering adrenochrome, a cooler packet? Do not open by customs, not to be disconnected from battery, valuable natural product, keep cool under all circumstances. They've got some explanation to do. Then these are also lists that are added to the data files with ID codes, other codes, unit names, More codes that I do not understand, but these are products, body ventilation system, body armor, body armor, weird products, X-ray security. Now I looked up a few of these codes, and every time I looked up that code, I came across a link of WikiLeaks. And so all these codes are in the WikiLeaks files related to the Iraqi war, and they are a reference to shipments to military units, so military shipments. And that sort of goes back to the military installations, the locations of these camps. So there's all these products that are listed, many body ventilation systems. Does that refer to underground activities? I'm not sure. Toolkit, body fender. Why was it added in this data dump related to adrenochrome harvesting? X-ray security body scannings. Medical bag. Sandbag. Cameras. Really weird. These were printouts that were also added on the USB stick, all linking to the madeinchina.com website. Depending on the product or the category, you go to a subsite, but the main site is always made-in-china.com. This product page is related to a plasma torch head. I don't know why it's added in here. It's a bit freaky. It's scary. Many pages that list hand sanitizers. I don't understand why that was added. There seems to be a story behind it that I haven't figured out what it means, because there's many pages that doesn't make sense. This is a bit more morbid. Medical dead body bags. Are these body bags ordered? I don't know. All made in China. Now this is very interesting. This product, because I went to the Made in China website and made some screenshots, and this particular product is related to carbazogrome, and it's a hemostatic, an agent that will seize the blood flow from an open wound. It's this one. And it's actually, I think, a byproduct made of adrenochrome, sold as a powder. Carbazochrome, the semi-carbazone of adrenochrome. And if you have any questions, you can contact the lovely Mrs. Cherry Feng for more questions. Made in China also sells adrenochrome in powder form. It's all hidden in plain sight. So that's made in China. And many hand sanitizers printouts. There needs to be something behind that as well. I don't know what it is. This is the last file that I want to point out, and this is actually even more disturbing than the things I've showed you so far. This is a CYM hunting schedule for 2021. Now, this relates to the children that are supposed to be disposed. There have been several witnesses, survivors of these human hunting parties that have come forward to talk about these hunting parties where children are hunted as a form of sport or entertainment. The first time these stories appeared was during the Marc Dutroux case in Belgium, the child molester that abducted children for the royal elite. Two witnesses of the ITCCS, Toos Nijenhuis and Annemarie van Blijenburg, also testified about these human hunting parties. Fiona Barnett also testified about this taking place in the US. They take place in the US, they take place in the Netherlands, in the neighborhood of Zwolle, near the Veluwe, in Belgium. It implicates the royal families, the top politicians, and these are lists by CYM, the hunting schedule for the United States. So these are listed per state for each month through the summer, and these are the hunting parties that were planned for next year, and that's used as well. It's 15 pages. I mean, this is really sickening. You can see the volume of this. So 600 children, or 600 hunting parties are supposed to take place. And these are the names of the children that were planned to be hunted. Riley Charles, he's 12 years old, blood type, Alaska, I think this is. This is the camp where they are imprisoned. To be hunted in April the 21st, etc., etc. You also find very young children, like 7 or 6 years old. That's because the elite likes to order specific children that have a specific look or age or sex that they like to have participate in these hunting parties, but also children that are of no value anymore for these this industry. They're disposed this way. And again, this just goes on and on and on. No matter how disturbing this is, we need to bring this to the light. And I encourage you to download the files yourself, store them in a safe place, share them far and wide. A big thank you to German Q Patriot for sharing this. Thank you to Steffi for being brave and doing the right thing. This is the link where these files can be downloaded. They open up in Telegram. If you don't have the Telegram app, you can download all the files here, or go to the Benjamin Fulford site. He wrote something about this data dump in the September 28th message, and he put an archived link there, but it only allows you to download the first PDF, and this is actually all the PDFs. These crimes can only exist in the dark. We need to bring this into the light. By exposing it, we make it stop. Thanks for watching.
Satanists have their own services that mock Christian services. They have them almost every weekend. They have them in underground churches across America. And they do everything opposite and against what a real church would do. Why would you want to join a group of people that think eating feces and drinking urine is fun? It's not optional. You have to do it. They all do it. And they don't complain. They get beyond that stage. They don't complain. They do it. I mean, can you imagine? I mean, what do? You go to an underground Hollywood club, a super secret Satanist club. Do they serve feces on toothpicks? These people are nasty. And to tell us the sheer demonism, demonic beings that control them, that make them do it. I mean, what human could eat feces and not just puke? Eating feces is huge with them. Huge. Anything abominable is high-ranking with Satan. Anything that we would think is totally inhuman, abominable, then that's what you must do in Satan's realm. These groups are huge. There could be 100, 200 people at a gathering. They meet on estates in people's mansions, often on a Friday or Saturday night, so it looks like the person's having a party, maybe. They meet in churches on Saturdays, underneath Catholic churches, for rituals. They have these rituals where they bring in animals. And this weekend, pretty much all the groups had donkeys. And they forced all the members to have sexual relations, bestiality with the donkey. Okay, you've been on my nerves for 2 months, you get the cat. And you've been on my nerves for a month, you get the dog. And you, the highest ranking of us all, you get the donkey. She chooses who gets what. And she forces them to be sodomized. They all do this, not just her. They force them to be sodomized by donkeys. They force them to perform fellatio on donkeys. And nobody gets away with it just because you're the president of the United States who goes to the Chicago ones where Penny Pritzker is in charge. Just because you're the president doesn't mean you get out. It means you have to give more. Because you've got the highest rank in the land. More abominable things are expected of you. It goes on. One of the biggest things you give up is any kind of humanity. It's nothing but about humiliation and degradation. You want more, you have to give more. You have to give up everything about what makes you human. And they all don't sit around in their black robes. That's so Hollywood. Because in all these rituals, a big part of them is the orgies that take place. They all take their clothes off. They're all doing drugs.
The 9/11 attack on America looked so much like a formula action-packed Hollywood disaster movie that it had "Made in the USA" written all over it. The only difference is it used real props and real people. It had terrorist villains, American firefighter heroes, fireball explosions, collapsing buildings, pedestrians chased by dust clouds, and it even had a God Bless America music score. Well-positioned cameras shot the action-packed drama from every conceivable angle.
Just the picture of the helicopter landing and the president walking in, and then the
19 hijackers have been Saudi nationals. So in the terrible...
He said that he didn't believe that Osama bin Laden... No one has blamed or accused him formally.
That how many people worked in the city is confirming that some 265 firefighters are believed to be...
None of us will ever forget this day.
People who knock these buildings down will hear all of it now.
America remembers. Sunday, 83rd.
The timing, the title, and the eerie advertisement for Harvey Weinstein's Lord of the Rings movie called The Two Towers was a prophetic and disturbing coincidence. Profits from the Two Towers movie were small change compared to the 9/11 reality disaster movie, which has become the world's top-grossing production of all time. The only thing missing are the 911 producer, writer, and director credits. But it doesn't take an Enron accountant to figure out who's cashing in. During the first week, the 911 producers made a spectacular fortune just on the stock market alone. How? By knowing in advance that the stocks in airline and insurance companies associated with the 911 crash would fall in value. Using that inside information, they made negative bets on the stock market called put options. Put options are bets that a certain stock will fall in value by a certain date. It's big risk gambling, unless you've got inside information that can turn your bet into a sure thing. But that's illegal if you get caught at it. Put option bets on the decline in 911-related airline and insurance stocks skyrocketed by a whopping 600% just before 911, which means that somebody knew about the attacks before they happened. Who exactly were those somebodies? Merrill Lynch and HSBC, Morgan Stanley Dean Witter, the Bank of America, weapons manufacturer Raytheon, the Lehman Brothers, General Motors, Swiss Re, Munich Re, and AXA Re Insurance Company, which owns 25% of American Airlines. These insiders bought put options through Deutsche Bank.
Most demanding clients trust Deutsche Bank to perform. Deutsche Bank, a passion.
Buzzy Klongard, the former executive director of the CIA, just happened to be the manager of Deutsche Bank. And so these profiteers from 911 were not Osama bin Laden or his band of U.S.-trained Arabs. They were blue-chip Israeli, U.S., and British businessmen. Within the first week, the 911 producers sucked up $40 billion in box office profits from U.S. taxpayers who were hypnotized, terrorized, and traumatized by the infinite reruns.
Think of it as a conspiracy theory true or false test. A. When George W. Bush started his first oil company, who helped fund it? Osama bin Laden's brother and brother-in-law. True or false? B. After a terrorist bomb at a barracks in Saudi Arabia killed 19 Americans, who got the multi-million-dollar contract to rebuild? The bin Laden. True or false? C. On the morning of September 11th, 2001, who was in a meeting at the Ritz-Carlton Hotel in Washington? George Bush Sr. and Osama bin Laden's brother. True or false? Actually, the answer could be D, all of the above. Because believe it or not, as far-fetched as they sound, each and every one of those things, the bin Laden link to the Bush Oil Company, the bin Laden construction contract after the terrorist bomb, and the bin Laden-Bush meeting on 9/11, is true.
Many of the facts surrounding the events of 9/11 point to a cover-up. Like the fact that the Bush administration ignored all of the advance warnings of the 9/11 attacks. Warnings from FBI agents like Colleen Rowley and from the famous Phoenix memo were not only ignored, they were suppressed. FBI Deputy Director John P. O'Neill quit his job when his investigation of Osama bin Laden was blocked. According to a September 24th Newsweek article, top Pentagon officials canceled their travel plans for 911 because of security concerns. While the American public were sitting ducks, all of America's political, military, and corporate VIPs were kept out of harm's way. Two Muslims accused of the 911 hijacking took their flight training at Rudy Decker's Huffman Aviation School in Florida. Rudy Deckers is linked to the CIA and drug smuggling through Carib Air and Britannia Aviation, which shared the same small Venice airport with Deckers. The media reported that on the night before the attack, accused ringleader Mohammed Atta and two other Muslim hijackers got drunk, fondled naked dancers in a Florida strip club called Shuck'em, forgot their business card and their Quran holy book at the bar, publicly bashed America, and loudly boasted about impending bloodshed the next day. Would devoted and highly secretive Muslim hijackers risk their planned mission by attracting so much negative attention? And why were they in Florida instead of Boston the night before their suicide flight? On the early morning of September 11th, 19 Muslim men well known to intelligence and security agencies supposedly waltzed past airport security checks, boarded 4 passenger planes, and turned them into deadly missiles without even a hit. By 8:13 a.m., flight controllers temporarily lost radar contact with American Airlines Flight 11 and reported a suspected hijacking. Even though Andrews Air Force Base is only 10 minutes from Washington, emergency response fighter jets took close to an hour instead of the typical 15 minutes to scramble and begin searching for the hijacked plane. By then, it was too late. President Bush already knew about the first Flight 11, which occurred at 8:46 a.m., when he sat down to chat with school kids at Booker Elementary School. It wasn't until 9:05 a.m. that he was notified that a second plane, Flight 175, had also crashed into the World Trade Center and that America was under attack. Instead of being whisked to safety in this national emergency, Bush nodded and continued chatting with the kids for another 20 minutes about a pet goat, while American citizens were burning alive and leaping to their death from the smoking towers.
Wailing against the wind as they fell, almost as if they had second thoughts. I was absolutely horrifying.
And you don't have to be a conspiracy theorist to wonder exactly what President George W. Bush knew about the attack, and when he knew it. According to the official White House version, it was at this moment in a Florida classroom that Bush learned the second plane had hit the World Trade Center and that the U.S. was under attack. But here's what George Bush himself said almost 3 months later when asked about September 11th.
I was sitting outside the classroom waiting to go in, and I saw an airplane hit the tower of a TV. My TV was obviously on, and I used to fly myself, and I said, well, there's one terrible pilot. And it said it must have been a horrible accident. But I was whisked off there. I didn't have much time to think about it.
Now wait a minute. George Bush was told about the second plane while he was inside the classroom. So you just heard him describe seeing the first plane crash on television that day. But that's impossible. No one saw the first plane crash on TV on September the 11th because the videotape of it didn't surface until the next day.
At 9:55 a.m., President George W. Bush took off in Air Force One with no escort or protection from fighter jets and circled around for the next hour. Why was the president's plane airborne and unescorted for an entire hour while hijacked planes were roaming the skies? The inexperienced hijacker pilots who took only a simulated flying course reportedly flew the third hijacked plane, Flight 77, into a Top Gun 270-degree turn, bypassed the offices of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, and crashed into an insignificant part of the Pentagon that was under renovation. Emergency response Air Force fighter jets were finally airborne when a fourth hijacked plane, Flight 93, crashed into a field in Pennsylvania at 10:06 a.m. The media reported that passengers overpowered the hijackers, but nearby residents saw U.S. fighter jets overhead and gave eyewitness reports of debris falling from the sky. That debris was found 8 miles away, indicating that the plane had been shot down. Within hours of the 911 hijackings, a massive Blame the Muslims campaign was launched by CNN and the media and continues to this day. In less than 48 hours, the names and mugshots of 19 accused Muslims were flashed across TV screens. If government investigators knew nothing, how did they identify 19 Muslim men as the hijackers so fast? On September 24th, firefighter Louis Caccioli told People Weekly point blank, "We think there were bombs set in the building." That claim was echoed by many witnesses and by firefighters who heard the explosions just before Tower 1, Tower 2, and Building 7 collapsed. The steel-supported twin towers were built to withstand the impact of a passenger jetliner, yet the official explanation for their collapse is that the burning jet fuel heated the steel support beams and caused them to buckle. Expert independent investigators insist that it's impossible for jet fuel burning in oxygen to melt steel, and that most of the jet fuel burned up outside the buildings in clearly visible fireballs. After the crashes, the white smoke turned black, indicating cooling temperatures, not rising temperatures as reported. Why did a company called Controlled Demolition quickly haul away, melt down, and dispose of 499,850 pieces of structural steel that could have proved the temperature the steel had reached and the use of explosives? Why did Tower 2 that was hit last fall first, 53 minutes after being struck, whereas Tower 1 fell 1 hour and 28 minutes after being struck? An even bigger mystery is why Building 7, owned by Larry Silverstein, collapsed much later on in the afternoon, even though it had never even been hit. If these 3 World Trade Center buildings were rigged with explosives, when could the explosives have been installed, and who controlled access to the buildings? The 30-year-old World Trade Center has always been publicly owned and managed by the New York, New Jersey Port Authority. That is, until a Jewish businessman named Louis Eisenberg became the chairman. Eisenberg is an active leader in Jewish Zionist organizations. He personally oversaw negotiations that put the publicly owned World Trade Center into private hands. Those private hands belong to 2 Jewish pro-Zionist billionaires named Larry Silverstein and Frank Lowy, even though their bid was lower than other bids. Lowy served as a commando in the Israeli army, and Silverstein just happens to be the former chairman of the United Jewish Israel Appeal. With Eisenberg's help, they landed the 99-year lease worth $8 billion for half price at $3.5 billion. During the moving, renovations, and security changeovers, explosives could have easily been installed in the buildings without detection. George W.'s brother, Marvin Bush, was not only the director of the World Trade Center's electronic security company, he was also the director of the World Trade Center's casualty insurance company called Houston Casualty. That company terminated their insurance coverage for the World Trade Center before 911, right in the nick of time. Another suspicious company occupied the 16th and 17th floors of the North Tower. That company, called Zim Israeli American Shipping, suddenly broke their lease, paid a $50,000 penalty, and moved out of the World Trade Center only weeks before 911. Zim Israeli American Shipping is owned by Zim Israel Navigation, which just happens to be owned by the government of Israel. If the new owners, Silverstein and Lowy, knew about the 911 attacks in advance, why did they buy a 99-year lease to the doomed buildings? Because they could do the simple math. Silverstein bought the $3.5 billion World Trade Center with only a $15 million down payment, which amounts to 0.01% of the total. He took out maximum terrorist insurance coverage only 6 weeks before the attacks. The demolition of the World Trade Center buildings on 9/11 eliminated Silverstein's cost for an $800 million facelift to update the aging 30-year-old buildings. As soon as the spanking new World Trade Center is finally built and expanded to over 11 million square feet of rental space, Silverstein stands to pocket billions of dollars per month. In the meantime, U.S. taxpayers are covering Silverstein's so-called losses. Then there's the big payouts from insurance policies with mega-terrorism insurance, which Silverstein took out just weeks before 9/11. Silverstein is demanding a 200% payout by claiming payouts for 2 separate 9/11 attacks instead of one. Silverstein's insurance companies, called Swiss Re and Munich Re, are the same companies under investigation for advanced knowledge of 9/11 and for profiting from 9/11 on the stock market. If Silverstein's insurance companies knew in advance about the attacks, why would they insure doomed buildings? Were these giant insurance companies handpicked to keep a lid on their insurance investigation findings and to ignore the evidence of 9/11 cover-ups? Silverstein has since bought out Frank Lowy, paid off investors and loan groups, put limits on victim compensation claims, and turned the publicly owned World Trade Center into the smelliest private real estate deal in American history. George W. Bush threw up permanent roadblocks to stop an independent investigation of the 9/11 events. When the 9/11 Senate Committee report was published, 27 pages that would have connected international banks to 9/11 were censored. On October 30th, 2003, a CBC television documentary investigated the 10-year friendship between the Bush family, the bin Laden family of Saudi Arabia, and the Saudi royal family. That friendship includes illegal presidential campaign contributions and partnerships in oil and weapons companies like the Carlyle Group. Since 9/11, 2,500 relatives of victims filed trillion-dollar lawsuits against 7 international banks, against the Saudi friends of the Bush family, and against the U.S. government for suppression of information. On 9/11, all U.S. flights were canceled, and desperate relatives of 9/11 victims were grounded.
48 hours later, September 13th, an update. Private flights were still prohibited. To take off required government approval at the highest level. That morning, Prince Bandar of Saudi Arabia visited the White House. And later that day, something unusual began to happen. Despite the blanket aviation ban, several private planes, from Learjets to a 747, were cleared to depart from various U.S. cities. On board were dozens of the Saudi elite, almost every one a bin Laden or a Saudi royal. Meanwhile, Elizabeth Alderman was desperate to find a way from Paris to New York, where her son Peter was missing.
The bin Laden family, whoever was in the United States, got safe passage home, and I couldn't get home to be with my children. Other families couldn't get to New York, who lived far away, to even begin to look for their children. At this point, we didn't know who was alive or who was dead. I couldn't get home, and the bin Laden family were all able to get home.
Since 15 of the 19 hijackers were accused of being Muslims from Saudi Arabia, why wasn't the fury of George W. Bush directed at Saudi Arabia instead of opium-rich Afghanistan and oil-rich Iraq? Before the first plane ever even hit the first tower on 9/11, a massive military buildup was organized near Afghanistan called Operation Swift Sword and Operation Bright Star. 23,000 British troops were sent to the Oman Gulf near Afghanistan, and 17,000 U.S. troops joined NATO troops in nearby Egypt. All of these forces were positioned for attacks on the Muslim countries of Afghanistan and Iraq before 9/11. The Patriot Act, which was designed to limit American citizens' democratic rights and freedoms, was also designed and written months before the first plane ever even hit the first tower. So who exactly are the producers of the 9/11 reality disaster movie that collected billions from insider stock market trades, 200 billion and counting from terrorized U.S. taxpayers, and gazillions of dollars from the conquest of Iraq's oil fields and Afghanistan's opium fields? Contrary to popular opinion, the producers of 9/11 are not practicing Jews. And contrary to popular opinion, The producers of 911 are not practicing Muslims. They are a secret network of international pirates who identify with no nation, no national flag, and no established religion. Their flag is the skull and crossbones, and their god, G-O-D, spells gold, oil, and drugs. It is important to understand the difference between the term Jews, Hebrews, and Zionists.
More than 60,000 armed Christians were on their way to reclaim Jerusalem from the infidels.
Between 1095 and 1291 AD, the Pope launched 7 bloodbaths called the Christian Crusades, torturing, burning, beheading, and mass murdering hundreds of thousands of Muslims and Jews in the name of God. The Pope's brutal soldiers were called Knights Templar or Knights of the Temple of Solomon and evolved into today's secretive brotherhood called the Freemasons. Between 1450 and 1700 AD, the Catholic Church followed up their holy terror with the Inquisition. Based on rumors of practicing witchcraft, the Catholic Church hunted down, tortured, and burned alive millions of innocent women at the stake. The Vatican was criticized for supporting Hitler and his Nazi regime. To this day, the Vatican is still under investigation for plundering Nazi gold from the Swiss bank accounts of Jewish Holocaust victims. Over the past 5 decades, more than 1,500 priests and bishops have been identified in the sexual assault of tens of thousands of boys and girls in their trusting congregations and orphanages. Why is this filthy rich institution preaching spiritual values of poverty and chastity while cardinals, bishops, and priests cover up their crimes of sexual abuse? Why has the church fought and resisted the compensation claims of their sexually, emotionally, and spiritually traumatized victims? Like Vatican City, London's inner city is also a privately owned corporation or city-state, located right smack in the heart of Greater London. It became a sovereign state in 1694 when King William III of Orange privatized and turned the Bank of England over to the bankers. By 1812, Nathan Rothschild crashed the English stock market and scammed control of the Bank of England. Today, the city-state of London is the world's financial power center and the wealthiest square mile on the face of the earth. It houses the Rothschild-controlled Bank of England, Lloyd's of London, the London Stock Exchange, all British banks, the branch offices of 385 foreign banks, and 70 U.S. banks. It has its own courts, its own laws, its own flag, and its own police force. It's not part of Greater London or England or the British Commonwealth and pays no taxes. The city-state of London houses Fleet Street's newspaper and publishing monopolies. It is also the headquarters for worldwide English Freemasonry and headquarters for the worldwide money cartel known as the Crown. Contrary to popular belief, the Crown is not the royal family or the British monarch. The Crown is the private corporate city-state of London. It has a council of 12 members who rule the corporation under a mayor called the Lord Mayor. The Lord Mayor and his 12-member council serve as proxies or representatives who sit in for 13 of the world's wealthiest, most powerful banking families. This ring of 13 ruling families includes the Rothschild family, the Warburg family, the Oppenheimer family, and the Schiff family. These families and their descendants run the Crown Corporation of London. The Crown Corporation holds the title to worldwide Crown land in Crown colonies like Canada, Australia, and New Zealand. The British Parliament and the British Prime Minister serve as a public front for the hidden power of these ruling Crown families. Like the city-state of London and the Vatican, a third city-state was officially created in 1982. That city-state is called the District of Columbia and is located on 10 square miles of land in the heart of Washington. The District of Columbia flies its own flag and has its own independent constitution. Although geographically separate, the city-states of London, the Vatican, and the District of Columbia are one interlocking empire called Empire of the City. The flag of Washington's District of Columbia has 3 red stars, one for each city-state in the 3-city empire. This corporate empire of 3 city-states controls the world economically through London's inner city, militarily through the District of Columbia, and spiritually through the Vatican. The Constitution for the District of Columbia operates under a tyrannical Roman law known as Lex Fori, which bears no resemblance to the U.S. Constitution. When Congress passed the Act of 1871, it created a separate corporate government for the District of Columbia. This treasonous act allowed the District of Columbia to operate as a corporation outside the original Constitution of the United States and outside of the best interests of American citizens. A sobering study of the signed treaties and charters between Britain and the United States exposes a shocking truth. The United States has always been, and still is, a British Crown colony. King James I was famous not for just changing the Bible into the King James Version, but for signing the first Charter of Virginia in 1606. That charter granted America's British forefathers a license to settle and colonize America. The charter also guaranteed that future kings and queens of England would have sovereign authority over all the citizens and colonized land in America stolen from the Indians. After America declared its independence from Great Britain, the Treaty of 1783 was signed. That treaty specifically identifies the King of England as the Prince of the United States and contradicts the belief that America won the War of Independence. Although King George III of England gave up most of his claims over his American colonies, he kept his right to continue receiving payment for his business venture of colonizing America. If America had really won the War of Independence, they would never have agreed to pay debts and reparations to the King of England. When Congress passed the 13th Amendment to the Constitution, the U.S. President was made subservient to the King of England. The 13th Amendment is called the Title of Nobility Amendment and forbids U.S. presidents and their officials from using royal titles like king or prince or baron. For some mysterious reason, the 13th Amendment, which was ratified in 1810, no longer appears on current copies of the Constitution. America's blood-soaked War of Independence against the British bankrupted America and turned its citizens into permanent debt slaves of the king. In the War of 1812, the British torched and burned to the ground the White House and all U.S. government buildings and destroyed ratification records of the U.S. Constitution. 1 century later, a corrupt U.S. Congress committed the biggest theft in world history. They passed Paul Warburg's Federal Reserve Act in 1913, handing over America's gold and silver reserves and total control of America's economy to the Rothschild banksters. Most Americans still believe that the Fed, or Federal Reserve, is the government. It is not. The Fed is a privately owned banking system whose majority Class A shareholders are the Rothschilds, Warburg, Kuhn & Loeb, J.P. Morgan, Rockefeller, Israel Thief, and the Lehman Brothers. This private banking cartel is the Fed and is never audited and never pays taxes. They print and design America's money, which displays their symbols of an Egyptian pyramid, a Masonic all-seeing eye, and the words "In God We Trust." Who exactly is the God they trust? They also collect American taxpayers' money through the IRS. Then they loan it back again with interest to pay for roads, bridges, and other public works. American presidents are handpicked and financed by these special interest power groups. Like George W. Bush, John Forbes Kerry, whose initials are JFK, is a member of Yale University's Skull and Bones Brotherhood. The Forbes part of John Kerry's name identifies his descent